Welcome, welcome. Let's go right in.
The hidden systems. Dr. Ellis sat back in his worn leather chair, scrolling through Reddit on his phone. His shift at St. Vincent's Medical Center had just ended, and like many doctors, he unwound by browsing random discussions online. One post in particular caught his attention. Doctors of Reddit, what do we not know about the human body? He smirked. The human body was a mystery, even to experts. Medical science had come a long way, but there were still thousands of unanswered questions. He clicked on the post and started typing a generic response about how the brain remained largely uncharted territory. But before he could submit it, a private message popped up from an anonymous user. You shouldn't answer that question, Dr. Ellis. Some things aren't meant to be known. His smirk faded. He wasn't famous, and his username wasn't connected to his real identity. How did they know who he was? He clicked on the profile, but it was empty. No posts, no comments, nothing. Curious, he replied. Why not? Science is about discovery. Seconds later, another message arrived. Because if you dig too deep, you won't like what you find. A chill ran through him. He had encountered conspiracy theorists online before, but something about this felt different. Before he could respond, the account disappeared. Weird, he thought. He chalked it up to a prank and put his phone down. But the thought lingered. The unexplained patient. The next day, during rounds, a nurse approached him. Dr. Ellis, we have an unusual patient in room 314. Came in last night with severe internal bleeding, but there's no sign of injury. No history of illness either. We can't figure out what's wrong. Ellis frowned. No trauma? No ulcers? The nurse shook her head. Nothing. And there's something strange about his vitals. Ellis walked into room 314, where a man in his 40s lay in bed, pale and sweating. His chart showed fluctuating heart rates, shifting blood pressure, and irregular oxygen levels, all completely inconsistent. The man's eyes snapped open. Doctor, he rasped. Ellis approached. Sir, you're in St. Vincent's Hospital. We're trying to figure out what's happening to you. The man coughed violently, and something dark splattered onto his sheets. Blood, but not red. It was black. Ellis's stomach twisted. Get a lab tech in here now. The man grabbed his wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. His eyes were wild. You don't know what the human body is capable of, doctor. You don't know what's inside us. Ellis hesitated. What do you mean? The man's breath hitched. They keep it from you. The extra system. The one they don't teach you about in med school. The monitors blared. His heart rate was crashing. Nurses rushed in, but before Ellis could ask anything else, the man convulsed violently. Then he flatlined. The hidden system. Ellis stood over the body in the morgue, staring at the autopsy report. Everything was wrong. The man's organs were in the correct places, but his circulatory system had extra vessels. His nervous system had additional clusters of ganglia, and his bone marrow contained a substance unknown to modern medicine. This doesn't make sense, he murmured. Dr. Patel, the hospital's head pathologist, sighed beside him. I've never seen anything like it. She pointed at the chest cavity. There's an entire secondary circulatory system running parallel to the one we know. And that black fluid? It's not blood. It reacts to light. I sent a sample to the lab, but I have no idea what we're dealing with. Ellis exhaled. Did you notice his last words? Patel nodded. He knew something. And whatever it was, I don't think we were meant to find it. Ellis glanced at his phone. The Reddit message from the night before came rushing back to him. Some things aren't meant to be known. His gut told him this was just the beginning. The black fluid. Dr. Ellis couldn't shake the eerie feeling that had settled in his chest. The patient in room 314 had died without explanation, his body containing anatomical structures no medical textbook had ever described. And that black fluid, what was it? Later that night, Ellis met Dr. Patel in the lab. The sample of the patient's black fluid sat under a microscope. Patel gestured for him to take a look. Ellis adjusted the focus. At first, the liquid seemed inert. But then, movement. Tiny, thread-like structures within the fluid twisted and pulsed, as if they were alive. Ellis pulled back, his throat dry. It's moving. Patel nodded grimly. And watch this. She turned off the overhead light, leaving only the glow of the microscope. Immediately, the black fluid reacted. It contracted, the thread-like structures pulling inward, as though it sensed the darkness. Ellis stared. It's photosensitive? Not just that, Patel said. It's aware of light. It responds like an organism. Ellis rubbed his temples. What the hell are we dealing with? Patel hesitated, then handed him a printout of the initial analysis. Ellis's eyes widened as he read. Unknown biological composition. No match found in human or animal DNA databases. It's not normal blood, Patel whispered. And it's not a pathogen either. It's part of him. Ellis placed the paper down. That patient said something before he died. He mentioned an extra system in the body, one we don't know about. Patel leaned in. What if he was right? The words hung between them, heavy and unsettling. The Watchers. The next morning, Ellis arrived at the hospital early. The first thing he noticed was room 314. It was empty. The bed was stripped, the monitors gone. There was no sign that a patient had ever been there. Ellis frowned and walked briskly to the records office. He pulled up the patient's chart on the hospital database. Error, file not found. His blood ran cold. The entire case had been erased. What the? Dr. Ellis? He turned to see a man in a dark suit standing in the doorway. His hair was neatly combed, his expression unreadable. Another man, dressed the same way, stood behind him. Ellis's pulse quickened. Who are you? The first man held up a badge. No name, no title, just a government seal. We need to speak with you about the patient in room 314. Ellis's instincts screamed at him to deny everything. I don't know what you're talking about. The man's expression didn't change. Yes, you do, and we need you to come with us. The second man closed the office door. Ellis glanced at his phone, considering calling for security, but something told him it wouldn't matter. He took a slow breath. Where are we going? The man smiled slightly. Someplace where your questions will be answered. Against every instinct, Ellis followed them out of the hospital. The hidden records. The men led Ellis to an unmarked black car. The ride was silent, tense. Ellis had no idea where they were taking him until he saw the sign. U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Restricted Division. They ushered him into a nondescript office building. Inside, a woman in a gray lab coat greeted them. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, with an air of authority. Dr. Ellis, she said, offering a curt nod. I'm Dr. Catherine Laird. I assume you have many questions. Ellis crossed his arms. You erased the records. Who was that patient? What was in his blood? Dr. Laird gestured for him to sit. That patient was an anomaly, one of many we've been tracking for decades. Ellis narrowed his eyes. Tracking? You mean there are more like him? Laird didn't flinch. Yes, and they represent an aspect of human biology that has been deliberately hidden from public knowledge. Ellis felt his stomach twist. Why? Laird pulled out a file and slid it toward him. Because the human body has two circulatory systems. One we all know, heart, veins, arteries. But the other? It operates in the shadows, only activating under specific conditions. Ellis flipped open the file. Inside were photographs of other patients, people of all ages, all with the same black fluid in their bodies. Diagrams outlined an unseen network of vessels running parallel to the known circulatory system. This second system is dormant in most people, Laird explained. But in rare individuals, it activates, often in extreme situations like trauma or near-death experiences. When it does, their physiology changes. Ellis's fingers tightened around the paper. Changes how? Laird met his gaze. They stop being fully human. Ellis inhaled sharply. You mean? Laird cut him off. They become something else. Their bodies adapt, repair, even evolve beyond normal limits. But the process is unpredictable. Some survive. Others. She hesitated. Don't. Ellis stared at the files, his mind racing. So that man, he was transforming? Yes, Laird confirmed. And if he had survived, he might have become something extraordinary, or something we couldn't control. Ellis's thoughts reeled. Why haven't I heard of this? Why isn't this in medical literature? Laird's expression turned cold. Because we make sure it isn't. Ellis exhaled, his hands shaking slightly. And what happens now? Are you going to make me disappear? Laird studied him for a long moment. Then, she slid another document across the table. You have two choices, Dr. Ellis, she said. Sign this non-disclosure agreement and return to your life, never speaking of this again. Or, she folded her hands. Join us. Ellis looked down at the paper. The weight of the decision pressed on him. Outside, the world carried on as if nothing had changed. But Ellis knew the truth now, and there was no turning back. Dr. Ellis stared at the document in front of him. His hands felt clammy as he read the words. Non-disclosure agreement. By signing below, the undersigned acknowledges their awareness of undisclosed physiological systems within the human body. Any unauthorized dissemination of this information will be considered a breach of national security, punishable under federal law. His eyes flicked up to Dr. Laird. You're telling me that the government has known about this for years? That there's an entire hidden system in the human body, and no one outside of this division knows? Laird nodded. Correct. And for good reason. Ellis leaned back in his chair. You expect me to just forget what I saw? Go back to work like nothing happened? Laird exhaled, as if she had heard this 1,000 times before. Most doctors take the NDA and walk away. They tell themselves it's better not to know. But I suspect you're not one of them. Ellis's pulse quickened. And if I refuse to sign? Laird's expression remained unreadable. Then you stay here. Indefinitely. Ellis swallowed hard. He had a choice to make. Sign the NDA and live in ignorance, or step into the unknown. His mind raced. He thought about the patient in room 314, about the black fluid that pulsed as if it were alive, about the anonymous message on Reddit that warned him to stop asking questions. He reached for the pen. Then, he hesitated. Tell me what really happens if I join you, he said. Laird's lips curved into a slight smile. You'll be given full access to our research. You'll work with the brightest minds in medicine and biology, and you'll see things that defy everything you've ever believed about the human body. Ellis met her gaze. And what if I don't like what I find? Laird's smile faded. Then you live with the knowledge that some mysteries are better left unsolved. Silence stretched between them. Then, Ellis exhaled and signed his name. Initiation. The next week was a blur. Ellis was officially transferred to a facility he hadn't even known existed. A subterranean research complex beneath the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. His medical credentials were updated with new clearance levels, granting him access to classified medical archives dating back over a century. He met a team of researchers, doctors, geneticists, and neurologists who had been studying the hidden circulatory system for decades. They called it the Shadow Network. Every human has it, Dr. Patel explained, now revealed as a senior researcher in the program. It's a secondary vascular system that remains inactive in most people. But under extreme conditions, like severe trauma or stress, it awakens. Ellis frowned. And what does it do when it activates? Dr. Patel tapped on a screen, bringing up MRI scans. It reroutes blood flow, triggers rapid cellular regeneration, and, if fully activated, enhances physiological abilities. Ellis leaned closer. Are we talking superhuman strength? Increased intelligence? Patel hesitated. It varies. Some people develop heightened reflexes. Others exhibit cognitive acceleration. But, she trailed off. Ellis narrowed his eyes. But what? She sighed. Not everyone survives the transition. Some people reject the activation entirely. Their bodies collapse from the overload. Ellis's stomach twisted. And the black fluid? Patel pulled up a separate file. It's not exactly blood. It's something else, something we don't fully understand. It seems to act as both a carrier and a regulator of the transformation process. Ellis shook his head in disbelief. And no one outside this facility knows? Patel smiled grimly. You'd be surprised how much of human history has been shaped by people who did. The experiment. A week into his new assignment, Ellis was brought to the lower levels of the facility. He expected more labs, more research equipment. Instead, he found something far stranger. A containment unit. Inside was a man, mid-30s, hooked up to monitors. His eyes were closed, but his body twitched as though he were dreaming. This is Subject 47, Laird said, standing beside him. He's one of the few who have fully activated. Ellis looked at the monitors. The man's vitals were stable, no signs of distress. He doesn't look sick. Laird's expression darkened. He's not. He's evolving. Ellis turned sharply. Evolving into what? Laird gestured toward the glass. See for yourself. Ellis looked again. At first, nothing seemed different. But then, the man's eyes opened. His pupils were black. Not just the irises, the entire eye, swallowed in darkness. Then he smiled, and Ellis felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Fear. The man tilted his head, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Then he spoke, his voice smooth and steady. You shouldn't have come here, Dr. Ellis. Ellis froze. His throat went dry. Laird pressed a button on the console, and the containment unit filled with gas. The man inside didn't panic. He just smiled wider. "That won't hold him forever," Laird muttered. Ellis turned to her. "What is he?" Laird sighed. "He's what comes next." The words sent a chill down Ellis's spine, and for the first time, he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Dr. Ellis couldn't look away from Subject 47. The man sat motionless in his containment unit, black eyes locked onto Ellis like he knew something Ellis wasn't ready to understand. "How long has he been like this?" Ellis asked, forcing his voice to remain steady. Dr. Laird glanced at the monitors. 5 months. Ever since his shadow network activated. Ellis shook his head. "You're telling me he's been sitting in that cell for 5 months, just waiting?" Laird's lips tightened. "Not waiting. Changing." Ellis turned back to Subject 47, who still hadn't broken eye contact. "You think you understand," the man said suddenly, his voice smooth as glass. "But you don't." Ellis stiffened. Laird didn't react, but her hand hovered over a security button on the console. "You need to stay quiet, 47. The man grinned, tilting his head. "Or what? You'll sedate me? Gas me? Lock me away like the others?" Ellis's heart skipped a beat. "The others?" 47 chuckled. "Oh, doctor, you don't really think I'm the only one, do you?" Ellis turned to Laird. "How many others are there?" Laird hesitated. Then she reached for another file and slid it across the desk. Ellis opened it. Inside were photographs of dozens of people, men, women, children, all with the same black eyes, the same altered physiology. Some were strapped to hospital beds. Others were in body bags. Some were missing entirely. Ellis exhaled sharply. "Jesus." 47 spoke again, his voice a whisper. "Do you want to know the real secret, doctor?" Ellis didn't answer. 47 leaned forward, pressing a palm against the reinforced glass. The human body was never meant to be just human. The lights in the containment unit flickered. 47's grin widened. "You feel it, don't you? The hunger? The curiosity? It's waking up inside you." Ellis took a step back. "What the hell are you talking about?" 47 tapped his temple. "You're different. That's why they brought you here. That's why they let you see this." Ellis glanced at Laird. "What is he saying?" Laird didn't answer. Ellis's pulse pounded. "What is he saying, Laird?" 47 chuckled darkly. "She knew the moment you touched that patient in room 314. You felt it, didn't you?" Ellis's breath caught in his throat, because he had felt something. Something cold. Something alive. 47's black eyes glowed under the dim fluorescent lights. "Your shadow network is waking up, doctor." Ellis's stomach twisted. "No, that's not possible." But deep inside, he knew it was. Laird stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Ellis, listen to me. We suspected this might happen. You've been exposed to the black fluid. Your system is responding." Ellis's breath hitched. "You knew?" Laird's grip tightened. "It's not too late. We can control the activation." Ellis pulled away. "Control it? You're experimenting on these people." 47 laughed. "Oh, doctor, you still don't get it." The glass panel between them trembled. The monitors flickered wildly. Then, the glass shattered. Breakout. Alarms blared. Security personnel stormed into the room, rifles raised. "Sedate him," Laird ordered, but 47 moved before they could react. With inhuman speed, he leaped forward, grabbing the closest guard and twisting his neck with a sickening crack. The others opened fire, but the bullets barely slowed him. Ellis stumbled backward as chaos erupted. Blood sprayed across the white walls. One by one, the guards fell. 47 turned to Ellis, his expression eerily calm. "You have a choice," he said. "Come with me, or stay with them." Ellis's heart pounded. Laird grabbed his arm. "We need to get out of here. Now." Ellis looked between them. Laird, who had lied to him, and 47, who had just slaughtered a room full of men. His hands trembled. His body ached. He could feel something stirring inside him. Something awakening. 47 extended a bloodstained hand. "I can show you what you really are, doctor." Laird pulled at him. "Don't listen to him, Ellis. He's not human anymore." Ellis's mind reeled. He had spent his whole life believing in science, in medicine, in truth. But this changed everything. He took a shaky breath and made his choice. Epilogue. The official report stated that an unfortunate containment breach resulted in the deaths of several personnel at the restricted division of the Department of Health and Human Services. Dr. Catherine Laird survived. She was promoted. The project continued. But Dr. Ellis, Dr. Ellis was never seen again. Some say he disappeared into the depths of the facility, a failed experiment erased from history. Others claim he escaped, vanished into the shadows, along with Subject 47 and the others like him. Rumors spread. Stories surfaced. Whispers of people with black eyes and impossible abilities. And late at night, on obscure corners of the internet, a question still lingers. Doctors of Reddit, what do we not know about the human body? Sometimes, an anonymous user replies, more than you'd ever want to know.